both books is put forward a new conception of science which provides us with a methodology for the progressive improvement of these big metaphysical assumptions. What we need to do is to represent them in the form of a hierarchy of assumptions. And as you go up the hierarchy, the assumptions get less and less substantial, and so more likely to be true, because the less you say, the better your chances of not being false, and more nearly such that their truth is required for science to be possible at all. So at the top we have the assumption that the universe is such that we can acquire some knowledge of something locally to make life possible. Well, if that's false, we've had it whatever we assume. So we're never going to want to reject that, even though, what I'm really having to shout against these people, even though we have no reason to suppose that it's true. And then the next assumption is that the universe is such that we can put forward some conjecture about it, which will enable us to improve our methods for improving knowledge. And we should adopt that assumption, a conjecture, because if it's true, it's going to be very useful, very good, and it doesn't really do too much harm. So it's worthwhile adopting that assumption. And then we need something a bit more specific on all those lines. At my next level, we have the assumption that the universe is comprehensible in some way. There is some kind of explanation as to why everything happens the way it does. It might be that everything happens the way it does because God wills it. It might be there is some cosmic purpose, or it might be there's some underlying unified pattern of physical law. The next level is the more substantial assumption that the universe is physically comprehensible. There is indeed some kind of unified pattern of physical law governing all phenomena. And then we have something more specific, possibly string theory. And then we have our current theories, general relativity and the standard model, and then we have the phenomena, the evidence. And what this provides is a framework of relatively stable assumptions high up in the hierarchy, within which much more substantial and assumptions very likely to be false low down in the hierarchy, where we can improve and develop our assumptions, and choosing those assumptions which seem to lead to the most empirically progressive research programs. It means that we can, it provides a sort of meta-methodology for improving the methods of science. And I think this has actually gone on in science. If it hadn't, we'd still be stuck with Aristotle. It's just it hasn't been properly recognized. The theoretical physicist who I think has come closest to seeing physics in this way was Einstein. Well, it isn't just that there are metaphysical assumptions built into the aims of science. There are also values, and there are also assumptions about the social use of science in various ways. And these are also profoundly problematic. And so we need to really see science as made up of not just two domains of discussion, evidence and theory, but evidence, theory, and aims. And scientists and non-scientists seem to be, ought to be collaborating on discussion of what the aims of science should be. And we need to do this both in the interests of intellectual integrity, scientific integrity, and in order to develop a science which is intelligently and sensitively responsive to the best interests of humanity. And this book, the Green Book, ends with my argument for wisdom inquiry, the more general argument. And what I argue is also that there is actually something very important to be learned from the conception of science that I was just indicating, which I call aim-oriented empiricism, about improving the methods of science as science proceeds. As we improve our knowledge about how to improve knowledge, something that clearly goes on at the experimental level. As we improve our knowledge, we develop our instruments, which helps us develop new knowledge, and so it's a sort of positive feedback process. But it also goes on, I'm arguing, at the theoretical level. And there's something very important to be learned from the extraordinary intellectual success of science about how we can achieve success in other areas of human life where we really do need to make progress, and where progress is much more uncertain, in particular progress towards social progress, towards a better, wiser world. And that's what the final chapter is about. This book, the black book, or the sort of purple book, is a much more modest book. It just sets out to solve 8 fundamental philosophical problems about the nature of science. The problem of undetermination of theory by evidence, the problem of what does it mean to say a theory is unified or explanatory, the problem of why we are justified in science to giving preference to unified or explanatory theories, the problem of what can it mean to say that physics makes progress if it moves from one false theory to another false theory, the problem of induction, the problem of what scientific method precisely is and how it's to be justified, and the problem of a rational method of discovery. And very modestly, it solves all these problems. And the primary problem is the problem of induction, which has been around ever since, at least since David Hume formulated it over 276 years ago, and all sorts of people have been struggling to solve it. Keynes, well, Hume, Kant, Keynes, Bertrand Russell, Popper, and it may seem a bit arrogant of me, actually, to say I've solved it, but the point is that there's nothing really very clever about it. What I've done is to show that in order to solve it, we need to adopt this view of science that I've been talking about, aim-oriented empiricism, with its levels of metaphysical assumptions. Because what this enables us to do is to have different arguments for adopting these assumptions at different levels. And insofar as people have sort of tried to solve it along these lines, for example, J.S. Mill and Bertrand Russell, they've just had metaphysics at one level. There's some sort of uniformity of nature, and it then becomes impossible. So it's not anything very technically brilliant, although there are a few little twists to it. But it is actually decisive. Finally, the problem has been cracked. So I say in all modesty. And I think that the fact that aim-oriented empiricism turns out to solve the problem and to be necessary for solving the problem is a very strong argument in support of this view. So that's it. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Roger. Remember me? Physics.
Sorry?
Physics.
Yes.
Boscovich.
Yes, I know.
Yeah.
I've been telling my wife about you.
Yeah.
The Boscovich man.
Well,
as you know, I'm a great admirer of Boscovich.
Yeah.
Of course, if you do aim-oriented empiricism, then Boscovich is a crucial figure. And in my book, Chapter 5, in Chapter 5, what I do is try and spell out the implications of putting aim-oriented empiricism into practice for theoretical physics.
Yeah.
And of course, Boscovich comes out as an absolute hero, because Boscovich's metaphysics is almost the only metaphysics of physics that is consistent and viable. You know, it presents us with a possible world that sort of does things like produce attractive forces, repulsive forces, cohesive forces, so you can understand how you could get solid objects, for example. And you know, all the other views, from field theory to field and particle theory, have all sorts of problems with them. Quantum theory and string theory don't really